Florida Sheriff's Office. Make yourself known. Door was open, lights were on, I knocked, no response.
The morning of April 8th started like any other for the Briggs family, but everything changed when Deputy Darius pulled into their driveway. He wasn't there because someone called for help or because a crime was happening. He was simply there to serve civil process. In plain English, that just means he was delivering court paperwork for a lawsuit. It is the kind of job a delivery person or a Girl Scout could do. It is very important to understand that this piece of paper was not a warrant. A warrant is a special legal document signed by a judge that gives a police officer the right to enter your private home. Without one, your house is your castle, and the government is supposed to stay outside. But Deputy Darius didn't have a warrant, and he didn't have a reason to believe anyone was in danger. The deputy walked up to the door and knocked, calling out for the sheriff's office. When nobody answered, he should have just left the papers or come back later. Instead, he claimed he saw the inner wooden door sitting open. This claim became his paperwork trap, a way to justify doing something he had no legal right to do. Even if a door is slightly open, the law is clear: a police officer cannot just walk into your home unless there is a true emergency. There was no sound of screaming, no report of a break-in, and no one calling for help. There was just a man with a stack of papers and a choice to make. Unfortunately, Deputy Darius chose to ignore the rules that protect every citizen's privacy. He turned a simple delivery into a dangerous intrusion, setting off a chain of events that would end in a heartbreaking tragedy for the family and their dog, Zelda. While Deputy Miller stood on the porch, he claimed that the inner wooden door was open at a wide angle, making the inside of the home clearly visible. However, the evidence tells a different story. Home surveillance footage from earlier that morning captured the father, Paul, leaving the house. In the recording, you can hear the very distinct and heavy sound of that inner wooden door being pulled shut and latched. This creates the storm door mystery. The deputy says it was open, but the audio evidence suggests it was closed tight. Even the deputy's own report admits that the outside glass storm door was shut when he arrived. To get inside, he had to physically pull that storm door open himself. The difference between an open door and a closed door is everything in a case like this. If the door was closed, the deputy had absolutely no excuse to enter. By claiming the door was already open, he was trying to create a reason to step inside without a warrant. But because he was not wearing a body camera at that moment, we are forced to rely on his word against the sounds captured by the home's security system. This moment is the foundation of the entire cover-up. If the door was actually closed, then every step the deputy took after that was illegal. He stood on that porch, looked at a quiet suburban home, and made a choice to ignore the privacy of the family living there. Instead of leaving the paperwork and walking away, he reached for the handle, pulled open the storm door, and prepared to cross a line that should never have been crossed. The moment Deputy Miller decided to go inside, the entire tone of the morning changed from a simple errand to a high-stakes confrontation. Even though he had already knocked and heard no one answer, he didn't stop there. Instead of staying on the porch, he reached out and pulled open the glass storm door. At that exact second, the family cat saw the opening and darted back inside the house to get away. Instead of seeing the cat as a sign of a normal home, the deputy reacted as if he were entering a dangerous crime scene. He reached down and pulled his pistol from its holster. With his gun drawn, he called into his radio to tell dispatch that he found an open door. Even though he was holding a deadly weapon, he told his office that he did not need any backup right away. He stood at the entrance one last time and shouted, "Sheriff's office. Anyone home?" When there was still no reply, he stepped over the threshold and into the family's private foyer. This was the moment that changed everything. By stepping inside with a loaded gun, he turned a quiet living room into a place of extreme danger. The deputy had no warrant and no permission to be there. He was now standing inside a house where the parents were away and the children were at school, leaving only their loyal dog to face an armed intruder. The tension was at its highest point as the deputy began to walk through the home, searching rooms that he had no legal right to enter. As Deputy Miller stepped further into the house, a silent witness was already recording the truth. This witness wasn't a person, but the home's own security cameras. The deputy would later tell his supervisor a very specific story. He claimed that when he entered the home, it was completely quiet and there was no barking at all. According to his version of events, he didn't even know a dog was there until he reached the hallway and the dog suddenly appeared to attack him. However, the audio from the surveillance footage tells a completely different story. From the very second the deputy opened the door and stepped inside, the loud, clear sound of a dog barking can be heard echoing through the house. The barking doesn't stop, it continues the entire time the deputy is walking through the rooms and searching the home. This creates a massive contradiction between the deputy's words and the actual evidence. If the dog was barking loudly the whole time, there is no way the house was completely quiet like he claimed. This barking was Zelda, the family's Belgian Malinois, doing her job by alerting the house to an intruder. The deputy continued to move through the home anyway, ignoring the warning signs. By claiming he heard nothing, he tried to make it seem like he was surprised by a vicious animal out of nowhere. But the silent witness proves that he knew, or should have known, exactly what was waiting for him in that hallway. This lie about the silence is a key part of how the story was built to protect the officer's actions. The air in the house was thick with the sound of Zelda's barking as Deputy Miller moved deeper into the private hallway. This was the moment the story reached its most violent and tragic point. According to the deputy's later report, he rounded a corner and was suddenly faced with a big dog that came right at me. He claimed he tried to put his leg out to block her, but he felt he had to use lethal force to stop the threat. In an instant, the sound of barking was replaced by the deafening crack of gunshots echoing through the small rooms. Deputy Miller fired his service weapon multiple times, hitting Zelda and killing her on her own floor. The husband was at work, the wife was out of town, and their 4 children were sitting in their classrooms at school, completely unaware that their beloved family member was gone. Zelda died while protecting her home from what she saw as an armed intruder who had no right to be there. What followed the gunfire was perhaps the most chilling part of the entire event, an extended, heavy silence. For a long time, nothing happened. There were no calls for a vet and no immediate sounds of panic. Then, in a strange move, the deputy finally announced sheriff's department again long after the fatal shots had already been fired and the house had fallen quiet. The deputy walked back outside, but he did not pick up the phone to call David or Sarah to tell them what he had done. Instead of apologizing or trying to help, he began to call for backup. He had entered a quiet home to deliver a simple piece of paper, and now he was standing on the porch of a house where a family pet lay dead because he chose to cross a threshold he was never supposed to touch. After the shooting, the story takes a very strange and confusing turn. For about 10 minutes, there is a gap in the story that is hard to explain. During this time, the deputy did not stay with the dog or try to call the family. Instead, he walked back through the house and even went out into the backyard and the garage with his gun drawn. He was acting as if he were still looking for a criminal, even though he was only there to deliver some court papers. What makes this period so mysterious is that the police officers' body cameras seem to be turned off. Usually, these cameras are supposed to record everything so the public can see the truth. But for this important 10-minute window, there is no footage showing what the officers were doing inside the family's home. Without that video, we are left in the dark about how they were acting or what they were saying to each other after the tragedy. This gap is a major problem for the Briggs family. It makes it feel like the officers were trying to hide something or that they were not being honest about what happened next. While the family was away at work and school, a group of strangers was walking through their most private spaces, and we don't have the full record of it. This 10-minute gap is a key moment where the trust between the police and the community starts to break down. When the government investigates itself but body cams are turned off during the most critical moments, it is very hard for a family to feel like they are getting the truth. This missing evidence only adds to the feeling that the system was working to protect the deputy instead of finding justice for Zelda. Soon after the shooting, the quiet suburban neighborhood was filled with the sound of sirens. The deputy had called for help, and an army of police officers began to arrive at the Briggs family home. This was the moment the cavalry arrived, but they weren't there to help the family. Instead, they began to circle the wagons, which is a way of saying they gathered together to protect one another. Even though no one had reported a crime, more and more officers showed up. They didn't just stay on the porch, they began to go all through the house, the garage, and even the backyard. This entire search lasted for about 40 minutes. During this whole time, not a single officer tried to call David or Sarah to tell them what had happened to their home or their dog. It was a strange sight to see so many police officers at a house where the only crime was a deputy delivering paperwork. They walked through the private rooms and looked into the family's personal spaces without anyone's permission and without a warrant. While the family was busy at work and school, a small army of strangers was taking over their property. This massive response made it feel like the police were treating the house like a dangerous crime scene to justify why the deputy had gone inside in the first place. By bringing in so many people, it created a sense of urgency that didn't actually exist before the shots were fired. This was a major part of the story flow, moving from a single deputy's mistake to a large-scale event involving the whole department. While the police were searching the house, they tried to claim they thought a home invasion was happening. They said the house looked disheveled, which means messy or out of order. They used this as an excuse for why they were racing through the rooms with their guns out. But when you look at the video from their own body cameras, that story falls apart. For a house where 4 children live, the home looked very normal and clean. In fact, there was one specific detail that made the burglar story sound like a total lie: the laundry room. As the officers walked through the house, you can clearly hear the sound of the laundry machines running in the background. This is what we call the laundry room lie. The idea that a burglar would break into a house, face a large dog, and then decide to start a load of laundry is absolutely laughable. The house didn't look like a crime scene, it looked like a normal home where a parent was busy doing chores before leaving for the day. The officers knew this, but they kept searching anyway. They were trying to find anything that would make it look like they had a reason to be there. By focusing on the messy house, they tried to hide the fact that they were in a place they didn't belong. This part of the story shows how the police tried to gaslight the public by ignoring the simple truth of a running washing machine. As more police officers gathered at the home, they had a group meeting right on the front porch. This is the moment they began to circle the wagons. If you look at their eyes and listen to their voices on the body cam footage, you can tell they all knew this was not a good shoot. They realized that Deputy Miller should never have been inside that house in the first place to have a fight with a dog. Right there on the spot, it seemed like they were formulating a plan to cover their own asses. You can hear them trying to find excuses for why they were there. One officer said the inside of the house looked disheveled. But for a house with 4 children, it actually looked very normal. It did not look at all like a home invasion was happening. The officers talked about the dog bite and the open door, trying to make the situation sound much more dangerous than it really was. They were talking to each other, but there was one very important group of people missing from this meeting: the Briggs family. No one was calling David or Sarah to tell them what was happening. Instead of being honest about the mistake, the officers focused on protecting the deputy. They were trying to build a story that would make the illegal entry seem okay to the public. This meeting on the porch shows how the system often tries to protect itself instead of admitting when something has gone wrong. While the police were busy searching the home and meeting on the porch, there was one very important group of people missing: the Briggs family. The husband, Paul, was at work, the wife was out of town, and their 4 children were at school. Deputy Miller knew exactly who lived there because he was at the house to serve them legal papers in the first place. Even though they knew who the owners were, the police did not try to call David or Sarah to tell them their dog had been shot. Instead of reaching out to the family, the officers treated the private home and backyard like they owned it. They stayed on the property for over 40 minutes, walking through the garage and the rooms inside without ever getting permission from the parents. It is a scary thought that the government can take over your home for nearly an hour while you are away and not even send you a text or a phone call. This absent family was being ignored while a small army of strangers occupied their most private spaces. The police had plenty of time to find a phone number or look for the family, but they chose to keep them in the dark. By excluding the homeowners, the police were able to control the scene without anyone there to ask questions or watch what they were doing. This left David and Sarah to find out about the tragedy later, long after the army of officers had already decided how they were going to explain the day's events. This part of the story shows a complete lack of respect for the property rights and feelings of a family in their community. After shooting the dog, the officers needed a reason to justify why they stayed inside the home for so long without a warrant. To do this, they began to claim that the house looked disheveled. In their group meeting on the porch, they used this word to suggest that a crime, like a home invasion, might have taken place before the deputy ever arrived. However, the evidence from their own body cameras makes this claim look absolutely laughable. When you look at the footage of the officers walking through the house, it doesn't look like a crime scene at all. Instead, it looks like a normal home in suburbia where 4 children live. There were toys and typical family items, but nothing was tossed around or broken in a way that looked like a robbery. The deputy even tried to tell his supervisor that stuff was in weird areas, which made him think there was a break-in. But the truth was right in front of them. The house was tidy enough that the laundry was even being done in the next room. The disheveled house excuse was just another way to gaslight the public and ignore the fact that the deputy had no legal right to be there. By focusing on a few messy spots, the police tried to turn a regular family home into a crime scene to cover up the deputy's mistake. This part of the story shows how far the system will go to find an excuse, even when the visual evidence proves that the home invasion story was nothing more than a desperate lie. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 12, The Supervisor's Visit, where Deputy Miller repeats his version of the story to his boss? Eventually, a man who appeared to be a supervisor arrived at the scene. He didn't have his own body camera footage of the talk, but the home's surveillance cameras caught the whole thing. The supervisor asked the deputy to explain exactly what happened from the moment he arrived. Deputy Miller repeated his paperwork trap story. He told his boss that the inner door was already propped open when he got there. He claimed that because he saw lights on and heard no answer, he thought there might be a break-in. He described walking through the house, noticing weird areas, and eventually reaching the laundry room. It was during this talk that Miller told a very specific lie. The supervisor asked, "Did you hear the dog at all when you came in?" Miller answered, "I did not." Completely quiet. No barking. He claimed the dog only started barking once he reached the hallway and came right at him. We already know this was false because the home's silent witness recorded the dog barking the very second the deputy stepped inside. By telling his supervisor the house was silent, Miller was trying to make it seem like he was surprised by a vicious animal out of nowhere. He even claimed the dog bit his leg, forcing him to shoot to stop the threat. This visit was the moment the official police narrative was locked in. The supervisor listened to the deputy's version of events and seemingly accepted it, even though the evidence from the house itself proved the deputy was not telling the truth about the barking. The law in this case is actually very simple to understand. Without a valid warrant or a true emergency, a police officer is not allowed to cross the threshold of your home. This is part of the Fourth Amendment, which protects every American from unreasonable searches and seizures. In this story, Deputy Miller was only there to deliver civil paperwork, which gave him no legal right to enter the Briggs family home. To get around this rule, the police claimed there were exigent circumstances, which is just a legal way of saying they believed there was a life-threatening emergency inside. Their only evidence for this was the claim that the inner door was slightly open. However, the law says that a cracked door is not enough. For it to be a real emergency, there would need to be sounds of someone screaming, a call for help, or a report of a crime in progress. None of those things existed here. By walking into the house with his gun drawn, the deputy ignored these constitutional rights. Even after the shooting, the police continued to ignore the law by staying on the property for over 40 minutes and searching the house multiple times without asking the owners for permission. They treated the family's private property as if it belonged to the government. This chapter shows that the Fourth Amendment is not just an old piece of paper, it is the rule that is supposed to keep us safe in our own homes. When the police ignore these rules and then make up excuses to justify it, they are spitting on the rights that protect every single one of us. The final result of the investigation left the Briggs family in a state of devastation and outrage. After the shooting, the Wake County Sheriff's Office conducted what they called a thorough review of the events. Even though the evidence showed the deputy entered the home without a warrant and lied about the dog's barking, the government reached a despicable conclusion: the deputy would face no criminal charges and would remain employed. For David and Sarah, this decision was a total betrayal of justice. They wanted to see consequences for the man who killed their beloved pet, Zelda, but instead, they were told that the deputy was returning to work as if nothing had happened. The family felt that the sheriff's office was gaslighting the public by ignoring the clear facts of the case to protect one of their own. Zelda's family is now left with constant memories of her throughout their home, but they no longer have the dog that died while being a good girl and protecting her house from intruders. They decided to share all the evidence with the public so that people could form their own opinion about what really happened that morning. This story is a powerful reminder that our rights don't end where your fear begins. When a deputy can walk into a family's home over a simple piece of paperwork, kill their dog, and then keep his job, it shows that the system is not working for the people it is supposed to serve. The final lesson for everyone watching is that freedom is scary, but it is something we must fight to protect every single day.